Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. I hope that you are having a wonderful day. If you're new here, my name is Neve and I hope that you stick around. In today's video, I'm going to be talking you through everything that I read in the month of May. This month was quite a hefty month of reads for me, which is quite funny because last month I read almost nothing. It appears that I've overcompensated this month to make up for it, which is quite exciting. I always love when I have a period of time where I'm just like must read books and do a little bit of devouring. It's always very fulfilling for me. So I'm going to talk you through what has been a really good month of reading for me. I'm just going to dive right in. I'm conscious of the length this video might become if I don't, because we all know that I like to talk. I have a lot of books to talk about and I don't want this video to be literally never ending. So we're just gonna fire in. For the most part, these will be the order that I read them throughout the month, but I might get a little mixed up and that's okay. So let's just get started. Well, the first book that I read this month was The Ask and the Answer by Patrick Ness. If you don't know, this is part 2 in his trilogy Chaos Walking. As you can see, I didn't read part 3, but that's not because I didn't like this book. I did actually thoroughly enjoy this book. I think I rated it 4 stars on my Goodreads. Can't really remember, but I think it was 4 stars. I really like this series. I really like the characters. I used to be a massive dystopian fan. I loved the Divergent series. I loved the Hunger Games. I read another series that was sort of similar and I can't remember what it was called. And I really enjoyed this. I forgot how much I do like that sort of not quite the real world but scarily similar to what the real world is becoming type stories. I enjoyed the frankness that a lot of the things in this book were handled with. I definitely think I liked the characters less as people, but I think that made me appreciate the writing and creation of these characters, because they only are more unlikable because the author has done such a fantastic job of making sure that they are reacting to their surroundings and the manipulation that they are facing accurately. I just thought it was really clever. I think Patrick Ness, again, is a wonderful author and I think that this book was a very good example of that, his skill and his talent. I did, when I finished this though, take a bit of a break from this series because they are a little bit brutal and I was like, I can't cope with any more war. It's too much war. But I will finish the series hopefully this month because I do want to finish it. I want to know how it ends, and also I have some more of his books in my shelf that I want to read and I'm not letting myself do it until I finish this trilogy, or else my brain will forget all about it and it'll never get finished and I will just be annoyed at myself. The next thing that I read this month was The Boys in the Band by Mark Crowley. I think I gave this a 4 out of 5, but I definitely will probably change it to a 5 by the time I reread it. I love it. I love the history of it. I love the play itself. I love the characters. This play is like a dream for theatre nerd me because it has such a rich history. It has so much passion and emotion. It's such a landmark piece. I love it. I think it's so interesting to learn about as well as interesting to read. I'd already seen the new film that came out as an adaptation of the revival that they did, and I wanted to read the original text because they shortened it for the revival in the movie. And I think that now, having read it, I just have such a more visceral reaction to and I feel like understanding of the movie when I watch it. Hopefully it'll be the same when I finally find somewhere I can watch the original movie. I can't find one yet, but I will get there. And I don't know, I just think it's wonderful. I think that it was one of the first, if not the first, play to be written about gay men that made them the main characters and portrayed them as just people. I just have so much respect for that and the challenge that this playwright accepted and the bravery that he had to be like, no, I am going to write this and one of you is going to let me put it on, and they did. I don't know, I just think it's wonderful. I have so much love for this play. If you're interested in it but aren't a reader, I would highly recommend the new movie that just came out on Netflix with the cast of the Broadway revival. It's a cast of supremely talented actors, from Jim Parsons, Matt Bomer, Andrew Rannells. It really is like, it's directed by Joe Mantello, who is a legend. But anyway, I've talked too much, we're gonna move on. Next up, I read Patti Lupone, a memoir by Patti Lupone. I'm giggling because I had such a clear expectation of what I knew this was going to be, and it was absolutely that, and I loved every single second of it. I gave this a 5 out of 5, which appeared to be an unpopular opinion. A lot of people who were reviewing this were like, she's just so self-indulgent, she's just turned everything to be about her. And I'm like, well, first of all, is that not what a memoir is? If you're writing a memoir, surely you're expecting someone to write from their perspective. Like, they're writing a book about their life, they're going to write it about the way they experienced it. But also, she's just brilliant. She is sort of like regarded as one of these like big divas of theatre, and like fair enough, but it was so much fun to see how these stories that are like legend about her have been translated by herself onto the page. I just loved it. It's such a fun way of telling stories. Her perspective about a lot of the things that I vaguely had heard about, or stories that seemed to be like well established pieces of theatre history, were just so interesting to hear from the source. She also put a lot of pictures in this. It's got like, she gave us some good like pieces of photography to go with it. I mean, she still is a very beautiful woman, but seeing photos of her when she was younger, I was just like in awe of her. Yeah, how pretty, like beautiful she was, but also she just, when you look at her, appears to hold this like power and like grace that I was just so like leaped out from the image and was very like apparent. And I think that it was just really wonderful to look back at all these old photos of her, as well as reading all these stories, and just see this like strong, passionate young woman. People definitely didn't always make it easier for her, although I suppose depends whether you believe her or not, but I'm gonna decide that I do. I just think she's brilliant, and I had so much fun reading her chapter about Sunset Boulevard, because it's a thing of legends, isn't it? Patti Lupone's experience with Andrew Lloyd Webber and Sunset Boulevard, and it was really interesting to read it from her because I'd only ever heard the story from other people. And I mean, I was not really a massive Andrew Lloyd Webber fan before, but definitely not anymore, which is, I mean, was the outcome you were going to get when you listened to anybody's encounter of Sunset Boulevard. He pissed off a lot of leading ladies, that's for sure. But yeah, I absolutely adored that memoir, and I would highly recommend it again for theatre fans or memoir fans. She's lived a very interesting life, and she writes about it in a very wonderful way. The next book that I read this month was Get Well Soon by Julie Halpern. Unfortunately, I didn't really enjoy this book that much. I think I gave it a 2 out of 5. I was really interested when it came. I thought the premise of, or the concept for the book, was really interesting. It's about a young girl, teenage girl, who gets admitted into an inpatient unit for mental health, and maybe it's not that bad, and maybe she finds some like positives along the way. I thought that that could be really interesting to sort of present these places as not the most horrible, scariest, end of the world places ever, because, you know, mental hospitals get a bad rep, and they're used a lot in horror, and you know, they're not always seen as the most pleasant or safe places. And I thought that it would be interesting if this book made them that. It didn't really. I also just, the language that was used I thought was very outdated and uncomfortable. I didn't really like the characters that much. I don't know, I just didn't enjoy it. I was very excited for the premise, and I just felt, unfortunately, very let down. I know there is a sequel to it, and I know I'm probably not going to read it, but it would be interesting, I guess, to see if there was any like improvement made, if the sort of slightly outdated fat shaming and whatnot was gone from the second one. I don't know, I just was uncomfortable, and I found myself like skimming through pages so that I could just finish the book faster, because I was not invested. I got bored really easily. It just wasn't for me, unfortunately. Next up, I read How It All Blew Up by Arvind Amadi. I really enjoyed this book. I gave it a 5 out of 5. I thought it was really interesting, fun, YA novel. It follows Amir Azadi, who is being blackmailed. He's gay, and he's being blackmailed with his identity, and he's scared, so he runs off to Rome. He meets a bunch of older gay men and has this sort of whirlwind month in Rome. I just thought it was a really fun book. I thought that it had the capacity to be quite dark and difficult to read, and it wasn't. It was just fun. He was experiencing community with these men who weren't perfect but loved him, and he got to experience what being queer was in a place where he could be himself with no barrier. I thought the ending was interesting. I liked the format of how it was told. I liked, if not loved, most of the characters. It was just a nice, quick, light read for me that I absolutely devoured. I think I read it all in about an hour and a half. It was just fun, and I recommend it if you want some good teen queer novels. There you go. Next up, I read Boy Erased by Gerard Conley. The cover says, Boy Erased, a memoir of identity, faith and family. If you're not already familiar with this book, it follows Gerard's journey through conversion therapy in America, a place called Love in Action, which is a very famous, I think, conversion therapy organisation. And it was adapted into a movie in 2018, and I had seen the film, and I mean, it's an absolutely brutal piece of film. I think it's a very good film, and I think the acting in it is wonderful, but I don't think I can quite say like it's enjoyable because it's absolutely heartbreaking pretty much from start to finish. I really enjoyed this. I gave this a 5 out of 5. This was a very hard-hitting, insightful experience for me reading this. I feel like I learned a lot, both about this man's experience itself but just in general. I think it's written so well. It's such a clear communication of his experience and his feelings. I never felt like anything was being exaggerated or, on the other hand, sugar-coated. I will say though, as much as I do think that this is such an important memoir to read, I will give a quick trigger warning, not only for, you know, the events of conversion therapy, but also for rape and sexual assault. He discusses his rape and the fact that is what unfortunately led to him being outed and sent to conversion therapy. So please keep yourself safe if that's not something that you're able to handle reading about. Maybe this is just not for you. I would rather you be safe and comfortable, but if that is something that you think that you are able to read about, I definitely would urge you to read this. Definitely if you're confused about conversion therapy, if you don't really understand the impact and effect and just horror these experiences are and that they cause, I would definitely urge you to pick this up and read it. Yeah, definitely. I think if you can, and if it would not put you in harm's way, you should read this. Next up, I read What If It's Us by Becky Albertalli and Adam Silvera. I think I gave this a 4 out of 5. It was just a wonderful dramatic teenage romance and I really enjoyed it. I liked most of the characters, and even when you don't like them because they're being frustrating and dramatic and they aren't communicating, you do like them because they're such a like, oh yeah, teenagers are like that, aren't they? It toed the line very well for me between too much drama where then it doesn't feel real and not portraying teenagers very well. It was just perfectly on that line for me of like overdramatic, messy teenage relationships that everybody has. They're never perfect from the get-go when you're like 15, and also just like the fiction and drama that makes it fun to read and get lost in. I just really enjoyed it. It was such a fun read. I read this really quickly. I mean, I was a little bit annoyed about the ending, but not because I think it's a bad ending, because I was like, no, I wanted to happen. I don't want to spoil it for you, but there is a sequel coming and I will be reading it, so hopefully the sequel will stop me caring about the ending. Hopefully it'll fix my slight disappointment. I was worried when I started reading it that it would feel like I was reading two different books because it was written by two authors. I was worried that you would be really able to tell the divide, but I couldn't really tell the difference, and even if there were moments where I thought I could, it didn't feel disjointed. I didn't feel like there was a disconnect, which was my main worry before I picked it up, but was definitely a completely unfounded worry because it was not an issue at all. But yeah, if you just again want some like fun queer YA romance novels, this one's for you. Last book that I read was The Perks of Being a Wallflower by I'm not gonna make a fool out of myself today. And plus I feel like everybody and their mum has read The Perks of Being a Wallflower, so I'll forgive myself. I gave this a 3.5 or a 3 out of 5. I was just slightly disappointed. I wanted to like this so badly. I wanted to love it and I didn't. I liked it, but I didn't love it. I just thought I would have a much deeper connection to this book than I did, and I think I have read this before when I was much younger, but I didn't really count it as a reread because I have no recollection of reading it other than vaguely knowing that I have. I love Charlie. I felt such a strong connection to him and his character. I thought that he was written really interestingly. I liked the way the author wrote, like the form of the sentences and the use of language I thought was really interesting, but the story felt quite disjointed at times. I thought there were moments where plot points that were quite serious were sort of just like being thrown in for the sake of it. There was no like build up, there was not really any resolution. Some of the things I just thought were unnecessary to be there or were just a bit awkward in where they were placed. I actually think I prefer the movie for this, which is weird because I never prefer the films of anything. But it was a fun read, I enjoyed it, I did like it, but I don't think I'll be reading it again. Which makes me kind of sad because I feel like every teenager and their mum loves The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and I do, and there were some really poignant lines in it that I felt really resonated with me, and I'd be like, maybe I'm making this up, maybe this is actually really, really good, and then I'd be like, oh no, I'm kind of bored, or like I don't really understand why that's there. So unfortunately I could not give this the 5 stars that I was desperate to be able to give it when I picked it up. That is all for this month. If you follow my book Instagram, you'll know I put another book on my books I read this month, but I'm going to leave it from the video because I just haven't finished it yet. I've got like a couple of chapters left, so I did for the most part read it in March, but I want to wait and see just in case the ending like supremely changes my opinion to make sure I'm giving an informed review, so that'll be in my April video. But other than that, this is my 8 books that I read this month, or 7 books and a play that I read this month. It was a really good month for me. Even if they weren't all wins for me, I always enjoy just the act of sitting down with a book. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, it would mean the world to me if you would give it a like, and if you're new here and you enjoyed this video, it would also mean the world to me if you would subscribe and stick around, and I will see you next week. Bye!